The ship's alarm jolted Captain Olivia Grant awake. She stumbled from her bed, reaching for the communication panel on her wall. "Captain, we're receiving an unusual signal from the outer system," said the night officer's voice. "I'll be right there," she replied, quickly pulling on her uniform. 10 minutes later, Olivia stood on the bridge of the Resolute, Earth's newest defense vessel. The large screen showed a complex waveform that pulsed with strange patterns. "We detected it 3 hours ago," explained Lieutenant Ryan Beck, the communications specialist. He pointed to certain peaks in the pattern. "It's definitely artificial, but doesn't match any known human transmission format." "Where exactly is it coming from?" Olivia asked. "Just beyond Neptune's orbit, Captain. And it's not moving like a probe or satellite would. Whatever's sending this is massive, based on our readings." Olivia studied the data. After 15 years in space, she thought she'd seen everything. This was different. "Have you notified Earth Command?" "Yes, Captain. They're waiting for your assessment." She nodded. "Prepare the ship for departure. I want to see this for myself." The Resolute left Earth orbit within the hour. Using its advanced fusion drive, they reached the outer system in just 4 days, a journey that would have taken months with older technology. As they approached the signal source, everyone on the bridge fell silent. Against the blackness of space floated 17 enormous vessels. Their designs were unlike anything humans had built, curved and elegant, with what looked like crystal formations extending from their hulls. "Are they ships?" asked Navigator Susan White. "Definitely," replied Olivia. "And they appear to be disabled." The largest vessel was at least 3 miles long. Around it, smaller ships clustered like children around a parent. None showed signs of propulsion activity. "Captain, we're receiving a new transmission," Ryan said. "It's changing to match our communication protocols. I think they're learning our language in real time." "Put it through," Olivia ordered. The screen flickered, revealing a face that was both alien and strangely familiar. The being had pale blue skin, large eyes with vertical pupils, and no visible nose. When it spoke, its mouth moved in odd ways. "Greetings, approaching vessel. We are the Sulfuri Exploration Fleet. We request assistance. Our propulsion systems have failed catastrophically." Olivia took a deep breath before responding. "This is Captain Olivia Grant of the Earth Defense Force vessel Resolute. We received your distress call." The alien's eyes widened slightly. "You understood our signal and came to investigate. Remarkable. Most species ignore distress calls from unknown sources." "That's not how we do things," Olivia replied. "How long have you been stranded here?" "By your time measurement, approximately 60 days. Our main crystal drive arrays experience simultaneous failure. We believed it was sabotage, but now suspect a previously unknown radiation field in this system damaged them." Olivia glanced at her science officer, Joe Martinez, who nodded. "Possible. Neptune's magnetic field creates some unusual radiation patterns." The alien continued. "I am Ambassador Zithkal. Our fleet carries 30,000 Sulfuri, including scientists, crew, and families. We were on a 5-year exploration mission. How can we help?" Olivia asked. Zithkal's expression changed subtly. "You offer assistance so readily. We expected to perish here. Our own species rarely intervenes when other vessels become stranded." "That seems cruel," Olivia said. "We call it non-interference. It prevents resource depletion." The alien paused. "Your approach is unexpected." Olivia smiled. "Ambassador, I'm requesting permission to dock with your vessel. Our engineers might be able to help assess your situation." "Granted, Captain Grant. Though I must warn you, our technology may be quite different from yours." "That's what makes exploration worthwhile," Olivia replied. "Encountering the unknown." As the Resolute moved toward the massive alien flagship, Olivia contacted Earth Command with a simple message. First contact established with stranded alien fleet. beginning rescue operations. Chief Engineer Scott Miller hated spacewalks. The suit always felt too tight around his shoulders, and the thought of only a few inches of material between him and the vacuum of space made his stomach churn. But today was different. Today he was walking toward an alien spacecraft. "How are you holding up, Scott?" Captain Grant's voice crackled through his helmet. "Fine, Captain. Just admiring the view." And what a view it was. The Xalfori flagship dwarfed the Resolute, its surface covered in what looked like blue-white crystal formations that caught the distant sunlight and scattered it in dazzling patterns. Scott and his team of 5 engineers floated toward an opening that had appeared in the side of the alien vessel. As they approached, they could see several Xalfori waiting for them in what appeared to be their own version of spacesuits, transparent bubbles surrounding their slender bodies. Inside the ship, after a brief decontamination process, Scott removed his helmet and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled faintly of cinnamon. "Welcome to the Starlight Seeker," said a Xalfori engineer who introduced himself as Krelvas. "We appreciate your willingness to help us." Scott nodded, trying not to stare at the alien's unusual features. "Happy to help. Can you show us to your engine room, or whatever you call your propulsion system?" The interior of the ship was as beautiful as the outside. Corridors curved gently, lit by what seemed to be living light sources embedded in the walls. As they walked, Scott noticed other Xalfori watching them with curious eyes. Some were clearly children, smaller versions of the adults, hiding behind their parents, but peering out with undisguised fascination. "How many people do you have on board?" Scott asked. "This vessel carries 8,000 individuals," Krelvas replied. "The entire fleet holds approximately 30,000 Xalfori. Many are scientists and researchers, but we also have families, educators, artists, a complete community." When they reached the propulsion center, Scott froze in amazement. The room was enormous, at least the size of a football field, dominated by a structure that looked like a massive crystal formation. Parts of it glowed faintly, while others seemed dark and lifeless. "This is our crystalline fold drive," explained Krelvas. "It normally creates a localized space-time distortion that allows us to travel faster than light, but something in your solar system's radiation field caused a cascading failure." Scott approached the structure slowly. "This technology is way beyond anything we've developed. We're still using fusion drives." Laura Chen, his assistant engineer, was already scanning the crystals with their equipment. "Scott, these readings are off the charts. I've never seen anything like this." For the next several hours, the human engineers studied the alien technology, asking questions and taking measurements. Scott quickly realized the truth. The damage was extensive, and the Xalfori were truly stranded. "Your life support systems," he asked. "How long can they sustain your people?" Krelvas's expression grew solemn. "At current efficiency, approximately 45 of your Earth days, perhaps less." Scott exchanged glances with his team. 30,000 lives. 45 days. "I need to report this to Captain Grant," he said finally. "The technology gap between us is significant. We might not be able to repair your dry systems." "We understand," Krelvas replied. "We did not expect rescue." As they prepared to leave, a small Xalfori child approached Scott, offering what looked like a carved crystal sculpture. "For you," the child said in halting English. "A starship." Scott carefully took the delicate object, which indeed resembled a tiny version of the Resolute. "Thank you," he said, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what they faced. Back on the Resolute, Scott placed the crystal model on Captain Grant's desk. "They've got 30,000 people out there, Captain. Men, women, children, or whatever they call them. And they're going to die in less than 2 months if we don't figure something out." Captain Grant stared at the tiny crystal ship. "Then we'd better start figuring, Chief." The United Nations Security Council chamber buzzed with tense voices. Representatives from every major Earth nation had gathered for an emergency session to discuss the alien fleet. Large screens displayed images of the stranded Sulfuri vessels, while Captain Olivia Grant stood at the podium, facing the assembled leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "you've all received my report. 17 alien ships carrying 30,000 lives are stranded in our solar system. Without our help, they will die within 45 days. Director William Harris of the Global Resources Administration rose to speak. Tall and stern, he was known for his pragmatic approach to Earth's limited supplies. "Captain Grant, while this situation is unfortunate, we must consider Earth's own needs first," he said. "The resources required to assist such a large fleet would be enormous. Our fusion fuel reserves are already stretched thin with the Mars colony expansion." Murmurs of agreement spread through parts of the chamber. "I understand your concerns," Olivia replied. "But the Sulfuri aren't asking us to fuel their return journey. They need help repairing their own propulsion systems. Systems that our engineers admit they barely understand," Harris countered. "How many resources will we waste trying to solve alien problems with technology beyond our comprehension?" The Secretary General nodded toward a woman sitting quietly in the second row. "Dr. Clark, as our leading xenobiologist, what are your thoughts?" Dr. Amelia Clark stood. Unlike the politicians around her, she wore a simple lab coat over civilian clothes. Her voice was soft, but carried surprising strength. "This isn't just about resources," she said. "This is a defining moment for humanity. For the first time, we've encountered another intelligent species. How we respond will show who we truly are." She tapped her tablet, changing the main screen to show images of Sulfuri children. "These beings breathe, think, and feel. They have families, art, and science. They need our help, and they possess knowledge that could benefit us immensely. Their medical technology alone could save millions of human lives." Director Harris frowned. "We have no guarantee they'll share such technology." "They already have," Olivia interjected. "Ambassador Zithkal has provided data on treatments for 3 genetic diseases our doctors have struggled with for decades." The debate continued for hours. Some nations feared the security risks of helping aliens with unknown intentions. Others worried about religious implications. Many simply questioned the cost. By late afternoon, the chamber had divided into clear factions. Captain Grant watched with growing concern until she finally requested to speak again. "I've spent time with the Sulfuri," she said. "They're peaceful explorers who value knowledge above all else. Yes, helping them carries risks and costs. But consider the alternative." She paused, looking around the room. "If we leave them to die when we have the ability to help, what does that say about us? What kind of species do we want to be?" The Russian representative stood. "My country has experience with harsh winters. When travelers are stranded in Siberian storms, we do not ask if they can pay before rescuing them. It would be shameful." Other representatives began nodding. The Japanese delegate spoke of hospitality traditions. The Kenyan representative mentioned their refugee assistance programs. Dr. Clark stepped forward again. "There's one more thing to consider. If we were stranded in their territory, wouldn't we hope they'd show us mercy?" After a final round of debate, the Secretary General called for a vote. The results appeared on the main screen. 157 nations in favor of assistance, 28 opposed, 12 abstentions. "It's decided then," the Secretary General announced. "We will launch Operation Lighthouse to assist the Sulfuri fleet." As the meeting adjourned, Captain Grant approached Dr. Clark. "Thank you for your support," she said. Amelia smiled. "This isn't just about saving them. It's about who we are. Besides," she added, looking at the images of the alien ships, "I've always wanted to meet people from another world." "Well," Olivia replied, "you'll get your chance soon. I need a xenobiologist on my ship when we return to the fleet." As they left the chamber, the enormity of what lay ahead settled on Olivia's shoulders. 30,000 lives and humanity's first real contact with aliens now depended on their success. Lieutenant Natalie Jones stared at the crystalline fragment in her hand. For 2 weeks, the best engineers from Earth had studied the Sulfuri technology, and they were still baffled by much of it. The alien crystals seemed to bend space-time in ways human science had only theorized about. "It's like trying to fix a quantum computer with stone tools," she muttered to herself. The makeshift laboratory aboard the Resolute was crowded with equipment and tired engineers. Coffee cups and food wrappers piled up as the team worked around the clock. The countdown timer on the wall showed 31 days remaining before the Sulfuri life support systems would fail. Natalie placed the crystal under a microscope and adjusted the settings. Something about the molecular structure bothered her. She had seen similar patterns somewhere before. "That's it," she suddenly exclaimed, startling her colleagues. "Everyone, look at this." The team gathered around her workstation as she pulled up comparison images. "See this lattice structure? It's almost identical to the rare minerals we discovered in the Venusian deep crust samples from the probe mission last year." Chief Engineer Scott rubbed his tired eyes. "Are you saying the key to their technology is on Venus?" "I think the crystals need a specific element to reactivate," Natalie explained. "And based on these readings, that element exists on Venus." Within hours, Captain Grant had convened a meeting with both human leaders and Sulfuri representatives. Ambassador Zithkel confirmed Natalie's theory. "The crystals require an element we call luminite to function properly," the alien explained. "Our scans indicated its presence on your second planet, but we could not retrieve it in our damaged condition. Venus is one of the most hostile environments in our solar system," Captain Grant said. "Surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead, crushing atmospheric pressure, and sulfuric acid clouds." "We're aware," Zithkel replied. "That is why we did not ask this of you." The room fell silent until Commander Daniel Wright spoke up. "The UNSC has been developing the Prometheus heat shield technology for Venus exploration. It's still experimental, but it might work for a short mission." 3 days later, the mining vessel Endeavour approached Venus with a crew of 12 volunteers led by Commander Wright. Their specialized suits and vehicle were the most advanced ever created, yet everyone knew the margins for error were razor-thin. Beginning descent, Wright announced as they entered the thick Venusian atmosphere. Heat shields holding at 92% efficiency. The journey down was violent. The ship shook as hurricane-force winds battered it. Warning lights flashed as external temperatures soared. "We have 90 minutes on the surface before shield failure," Wright reminded his team as they touched down. "Let's make them count." The landscape outside was a vision of hell, a scorched rocky plain under a sickly yellow-orange sky. The team deployed their mining equipment, following Natalie's coordinates to a promising site. The specialized drill bit through the Venusian crust, but progress was agonizingly slow. At the 60-minute mark, they had barely reached the depth where the element should be found. "Shield efficiency down to 40%, reported engineer Paul Green. "We need to wrap this up." "Just a few more meters," Wright insisted, watching the drill sensors. At 78 minutes, with shield failure imminent, the drill broke through into a vein of shimmering blue-white crystals. "That's it. That's the luminite," exclaimed geologist Maria Diaz. They hurriedly extracted what they could, but disaster struck as they prepared to leave. A sudden pressure wave knocked over their equipment, pinning crew member Jack Wilson beneath it. "Leave me," Jack shouted as Wright and Green struggled to free him. "The shields won't last." "We don't leave anyone behind," Wright grunted, finally shifting the heavy machinery. They made it back to the ship with just minutes to spare. As they lifted off, the external temperature sensors failed completely, and warning alarms blared throughout the cabin. "Hull integrity at 17%, the computer announced dispassionately. The Endeavour broke through the clouded layer, with its outer shields disintegrating, but the precious cargo, enough luminite to potentially repair one Sulfuri ship, was secure. When they docked with the Resolute, the mining team emerged exhausted and injured, but alive. Natalie rushed forward to examine the crystals. "Will it work?" Wright asked, His face burned despite the protection of his suit. Natalie looked up, a smile breaking across her tired face. It's perfect. We can save them. Frank Cooper had never expected to spend his 35th birthday teaching alien biology to extraterrestrials. Yet here he was, standing before a group of HFY scientists, explaining the basics of Earth's ocean ecosystems. So you see, the coral reefs are actually living organisms that create habitats for thousands of other species, he explained, showing holographic images of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. The HFY listened intently, their large eyes blinking occasionally in what Frank had learned was their expression of fascination. Their homeworld had no oceans, only vast networks of underground liquid methane rivers. The concept of Earth's water-dominated environment was completely foreign to them. These small organisms build structures that can be seen from space, asked one HFY scientist named Velnar. Remarkable efficiency. As the engineers worked on repairing the alien ships, cultural exchange sessions had become daily occurrences. Captain Grant had encouraged these interactions, believing that understanding each other was as important as the technical rescue mission. After Frank's presentation, Velnar approached him with what looked like a small silver box. "We noticed your frequent discomfort," the alien said. "Our scans indicate a chronic inflammation in your right shoulder joint." Frank touched his shoulder self-consciously. An old swinning injury had bothered him for years. "This is a cellular regeneration device," Velnar continued. "It will stimulate your body's natural healing processes, a gift in exchange for your knowledge." Later that day, Frank reported to Dr. Clark's makeshift laboratory, his shoulder feeling better than it had in a decade. "Their medical technology is incredible," he told her, showing the small device. Velnar said they've eliminated most physical suffering among their species. Dr. Clark examined the device carefully. "They've offered to share medical knowledge that could help us treat several genetic diseases. This could change everything, Frank." Across the ship, in what had become known as the Cultural Center, young engineer Lisa Powell sat with a HFY named Trelvor. Unlike most of his species, Trelvor was fascinated by human art and had requested to learn about Earth music. Lisa played recordings ranging from classical symphonies to modern pop songs. She watched as Trelvor's skin changed subtle hues with each new piece, a HFY emotional response. "Your music contains such contradictions," Trelvor said, struggling to find the right words. "Sadness and joy together. How can this be?" "That's what makes it beautiful," Lisa explained. "The contrast, the complexity." She handed him her violin, which she had brought aboard for her off-duty hours. "Would you like to try?" Trelvor carefully took the instrument, holding it as Lisa demonstrated. His first attempt produced a screech that made them both laugh, a sound that was surprisingly similar across their species. By the third attempt, he managed to produce a decent note. "I feel the vibrations through my skin receptors," he said with wonder. "It is moving." In the main engineering bay, Scott Miller worked alongside Krelvass, watching as the first luminite crystal was carefully integrated into the damaged drive system. A soft blue glow began to emanate from the previously dark crystals. "It's working," Scott said, barely able to contain his excitement. "Yes," Krelvass agreed. "One ship can now be repaired, but we need more luminite for the others." Scott nodded solemnly. The Venus mission had been costly, with 3 crew members still in medical care for severe burns and radiation exposure. Getting enough luminite for all 17 ships would be an enormous challenge. That evening, Captain Grant hosted a small dinner for Ambassador Zithkel and other representatives from both species. The meal had been carefully prepared to accommodate both human and HFY digestive systems. "I never imagined we would find such kindness so far from home," Zithkel said. "Our own history taught us to expect fear or hostility from other intelligent species. We have those instincts too," Captain Grant admitted. "But we're trying to be better than our fears." As the dinner concluded, a young HFY approached with a crystal sculpture created to commemorate the cooperation between their peoples. It showed two hands, one human, one sulfury, reaching toward each other across a sea of stars. Even if we never meet again after our departure, Ambassador Zithkel said, know that the story of Earth's compassion will be told throughout our travels across the galaxy. The alarm sounded at 300 hours, jolting everyone awake throughout the Resolute. Captain Grant rushed to the bridge, still pulling on her uniform jacket. Report, she demanded. Lieutenant Ryan Beck pointed to the main view screen. Massive solar activity, Captain. A flare just erupted from the sun's surface, and it's heading directly toward us. The screen showed a massive ejection of superheated plasma racing outward from the sun. Computer projections traced its path directly through the sector where both the human vessels and the disabled sulfury fleet were positioned. How long do we have? Olivia asked. Approximately 9 hours before it reaches us, Ryan replied. It's one of the largest flares recorded in decades. Ambassador Zithkel arrived on the bridge moments later, having been notified of the danger. Our ship's outer hulls can withstand some radiation, the alien said, but not of this magnitude. With our defense systems offline, many of our people will die. Scott Miller studied the data with growing concern. We could move the Resolute and maybe provide shelter for some of the sulfury, but there's no way to evacuate 30,000 people in 9 hours. What about the repaired ship? Olivia asked. The one with the functioning crystal drive. The Starlight Seeker could escape, Ambassador Zithkel confirmed, but it can only carry about 1/5 of our population. The implications hung heavy in the air. Who would be saved? Who would be left behind? Zithkel straightened to his full height. I will not abandon my people. If some must face death, I will remain with them. Olivia walked to the viewport, looking out at the distant sun that had suddenly become so threatening. In the silence, an idea began to form. Earth's orbital defense platforms, she said slowly. They're designed to create energy shields to protect against asteroids and space debris. But they're in Earth orbit, Scott pointed out. We're way beyond their range. Yes, but what if we adapted the technology? Olivia turned to face the room. The principles could work here if we had enough power sources. For the next hour, human and sulfury engineers huddled together, frantically working through calculations and possibilities. Meanwhile, the solar flare continued its approach, a wall of deadly radiation that would sweep through their position like an invisible tsunami. We could reconfigure the shield generators from the Resolute and combine them with energy cells from the sulfury ships, Scott suggested. But we'd need something to amplify the field. Trelvor, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. The crystal arrays, even the damaged ones, still store enormous energy. If your shield technology were channeled through them, that could work. Lisa Powell exclaimed. The crystals could serve as amplifiers. What followed was a desperate race against time. Every available crew member and volunteer worked to implement their hastily created plan. Human engineers dismantled shield generators, while sulfury scientists reconfigured crystal arrays to function as amplification nodes. Outside, teams in spacesuits positioned the makeshift devices in a spherical pattern surrounding both fleets. The work was demanding and dangerous, with several close calls as exhausted workers made mistakes in the vacuum of space. 7 hours later, with just 2 hours remaining before the solar flare's arrival, they faced a critical problem. The system needs a central control unit to coordinate all the nodes, Scott explained. Our computers aren't powerful enough to process the data. And our main computing core was damaged in the initial propulsion failure, added Krulvass. Captain Grant looked between the human and alien engineers. Then we need to create a hybrid system. Right now. In the final hour, Lisa Powell and Trelvor worked side by side, their hands moving in perfect synchronization as they integrated sulfury crystalline memory structures with human quantum processors. It was technology that had never existed before, born from the combined knowledge of two civilizations facing extinction together. 50 minutes to impact, announced Lieutenant Beck, his voice tight with tension. The makeshift shield system was in place, but untested. No one knew if it would hold against the coming storm of radiation and charged particles. "Activating now," Scott said, initiating the power sequence. Around them, the crystal nodes began to glow with increasing brightness. Energy flowed between them, forming visible connections of light that gradually expanded outward. Above, below, and around both fleets, a shimmering barrier took shape, part human technology, part alien science, all desperation. "Now we wait," Captain Grant said quietly, watching the approaching wall of stellar fire on the view screen. The solar flare struck with terrible force. Inside the Resolute, the lights flickered as power was diverted to maintain the shield. Through the viewports, the crew could see the strange beauty of the hybrid shield, a shimmering bubble of blue-white energy shot through with streaks of crystalline light. "Shield integrity at 60%, Scott Miller announced, his eyes fixed on the readings. 55. 50. Captain Grant gripped the edge of her command chair. "Will it hold?" "Unknown," replied Krelvass, the Sulfuri engineer who had become a fixture on the bridge. "This technology has never been tested." For 17 minutes, the solar radiation battered against their defenses. The shield wavered, thinning in places before strengthening again as the crystal nodes adjusted themselves. "Remarkable," murmured Ambassador Zithkal. "The crystals are learning, adapting to the radiation pattern." When the worst of the flare had passed, a cheer erupted throughout both human and alien vessels. The shield had held. Not a single life had been lost. That night, there was celebration. But the next morning brought them back to the central problem. The Sulfuri fleet remained stranded, with only one ship partially repaired. In the weeks that followed, Earth sent 3 more mining expeditions to Venus. Each returned with precious luminite crystals, though not without cost. The dangerous missions claimed 2 lives and left several crew members with injuries that would never fully heal. But their sacrifice made a difference. One by one, the Sulfuri vessels regained power. Engineers from both species worked together, creating new technologies that neither could have developed alone. 3 months after first contact, the final Sulfuri ship was repaired. The once disabled fleet now hummed with energy, crystal drives glowing with the strange blue-white light that signified their readiness to depart. On the evening before their scheduled departure, Captain Grant stood in the Resolute's observation lounge with Ambassador Zithkal, watching as technicians made final adjustments to the alien vessels. "Your people have done the impossible," the ambassador said. "You risk everything for strangers." "It's what we hope others would do for us," Olivia replied simply. Zithkal handed her a small crystal device. "This contains medical knowledge that will help your people overcome many diseases that still plague your world. It is a small repayment for your kindness." "And this," the ambassador continued, producing a larger crystal, "contains the coordinates and communication protocols for the Galactic Scientific Alliance, a coalition of 17 spacefaring species who share knowledge and resources. Earth is invited to join as our newest member." Olivia accepted both gifts with a sense of wonder. "This will change everything for us." "As you have changed everything for us," Zithkal replied. "Not just our survival, but our understanding of what is possible between different worlds." The next morning, Earth's leaders gathered on a specially constructed observation platform to witness the departure. Thousands watched in person while billions more viewed the event through broadcasts. One by one, the Sulfuri ships activated their crystal drives. The familiar blue-white glow intensified until it seemed each vessel was wrapped in its own miniature star. Then, in perfect formation, they began to move away from Earth. The flagship, the Starlight Seeker, was the last to depart. Before it left, it released a small object into orbit around Earth, a monument created from the same crystal technology that powered their ships. As the Sulfuri fleet disappeared into the depths of space, the monument activated. It projected a holographic message visible from Earth's surface, written in all human languages. "In the vastness of space, we found not just assistance, But friendship, humanity's compassion shines brighter than any star. 6 months later, an Earth vessel made its first journey to the nearest star system using a new hybrid drive. Part human fusion technology, part sulfuri crystal science. Its name was inscribed on the hull in both English and sulfuri script. Lighthouse. Commander Lisa Powell sat in the captain's chair, with Trelvor beside her as the science officer. The sulfuri had requested to remain on Earth as a cultural liaison, the first of his kind. Course laid in, Captain, reported Navigator Susan White. Ready when you are. Lisa nodded, thinking of everything that had led to this moment: a distress call, a desperate rescue, and the beginning of humanity's true journey to the stars. Let's light the way, she said. Engage.